So this is an excerpt of Assata Shakur's book, her autobiography, since today is maybe her birthday. So here's a part from chapter 2. The FBI cannot find any evidence that I was born. On my FBI wanted poster, they list my birth date as July 16th, 1947, and in parentheses, not substantiated by birth records. Anyway, I was born. I am the older of two children. My sister Beverly was born 5 years later. The name my mama gave me was Joanne Deborah Byron. I am told that I was a happy, fat baby and that I was talking in complete sentences when I was about 9 months old. They say that I was lazy, though, that I talked way before I learned to walk. Everybody says that I had my days mixed up with my nights and kept everybody up all night. I'm still pretty much a night owl. The only other tale I remember hearing about my babyhood was that I would scream at the top of my lungs whenever anybody wearing furs or feathers came near me. I'm still not too fond of furs and feathers. My mother and father were divorced shortly after I was born. I lived with my mother, my aunt, now Evelyn Williams, my grandmother, Lulu Hill, and my grandfather, Frank Hill, in a house in the Bricktown section of Jamaica, New York. The only thing I remember about the house is the backyard, which I loved, and a huge dog next door. I remember the dog well because he terrified me. To my young eyes, he looked like a giant, a canine version of King Kong or Mighty Joe Young. I'm still not too wild about dogs. When I was 3 years old, my grandparents sold the house and moved down south. I moved with them. We moved into a big wooden house on 7th Street in Wilmington, North Carolina. It was the house my grandfather had grown up in. It had a wraparound porch with a big green swing and, of course, rose bushes in the front yard and a pecan tree in the back. My grandfather originally thought that the house had belonged to my great grandfather, Papa Link, short for Lincoln, but they found out that he had only been given the house the use. He had only been given the use of the house for his lifetime. Papa Link had worked as a chauffeur for one of the most prominent white families in Wilmington, and the story goes, had been a prominent member of the black community. He and my great grandmother, Mama Jessie, that's my grandmother's name too, had worked hard all their lives, had raised 11 children in their house, and had died under the impression that the house was theirs. Fine print and white lawyers have a way of robbing black people of what is theirs. My grandparents were forced to buy the house again. Who's better than you? Nobody. Who? Nobody. Get that head up. Yes. Yes, who? Yes, grandmommy. I want that head held high, and I don't want you taking no mess from anybody. You understand? Yes, grandmommy. Don't you let me hear about anybody walking over my grandbaby. No, grandmommy. I don't want nobody taking advantage of you. You hear me? Yes, I hear you. Yes, who? Yes, grandmommy. All of my family tried to instill in me a sense of personal dignity, but my grandmother and my grandfather were really fanatic about it. Over and over, they would tell me, "You're as good as anyone else. Don't let anybody tell you they're better than you." My grandparents strictly forbade me to say yes, ma'am, and yes, sir, or to look down at my shoes, or to make subservient gestures when talking to white people. You look them in the eye when you talk to them, I was told, and you speak up like you got some sense. I was told to speak in a loud, clear voice and to hold my head up high or risk having my grandparents knock it off my shoulders. My grandparents were big on respect. I was to be polite and respectful to adults and to say good morning and good evening as I passed the neighbors' houses. Any kind of backtalk or sass was simply out of the question. My grandparents didn't even permit me to answer questions with a simple yes or no. Instead, I had to say yes, grandmother, or no, grandfather. But when it came to dealing with white people in the segregated South, my grandmother would tell me menacingly, "Don't you respect nobody that don't respect you. You hear me?" Yes, grandmother. I would answer, my voice almost a whisper. "Speak up," she would tell me repeatedly, something she seemed hell bent on making me do. She would send me to the store with clear instructions on what to bring back. I was under no circumstances to come home with inferior goods, something which happened all too often to black people in the South. "You tell them you don't want any garbage, and you better not come back with any," she would warn me. If the store owner sold me something that my grandmother didn't like, I would have to return to the store and get the thing changed or get my money back. "You speak up loud and clear. Don't let me have to go down to the store." I'm messing up a little bit, but you get the point. Scared to death of the fuss my grandmother would make if she had to go to the store herself, I would hurry back to the store, prepared to raise almighty hell. Whenever my grandmother heard about somebody being mistreated, especially if it was a man mistreating a woman, she would glare at me and say, "Don't you let anybody mistreat you. You hear? We're not raising you up to be mistreated. You hear? I don't want you taking no mess off of nobody. You understand?" Yes, grandmother. I would answer for what seemed like the millionth time, wondering why my grandmother liked to repeat herself so often. The tactics that my grandparents used were crude, and I hated it when they would repeat everything so often. But the lessons that they taught me more than anything else I learned in life helped me to deal with the things I would face growing up in America. But a lot of times for my grandparents, pride and dignity were hooked up to things like position and money. For them, being just as good as white people meant having what white people had. They would tell me to go to school and study so that I could have a nice house and nice clothes and a nice car. White people don't want us to have nothing, they would tell me. That's why you got to get your education so that you can be somebody and have something in life. Becoming somebody in life just didn't mean too much to me. I wanted to feel happy, to feel good. My awareness of class differences in the Black community came at an early age. Although my grandmother taught me more about being proud and strong than anyone I know, she had a lot of Booker T. Washington pull yourself up by the bootstrap, talented 10th ideas. She had worked hard and had made a decent living as a piece worker in a factory, but she had other ideas for me. She was determined that I would become part of Wilmington's talented 10th, the privileged class, part of the so called Black bourgeois. One of her first steps was to sternly forbid me to play with alley rats. It was impossible for me to obey her orders since I had absolutely no idea what an alley rat was. I often became the unwitting object of my grandmother's fury, charged with the crime of alley rat playing. My grandmother, writhing with annoyance, would threaten me with untold punishments if I continued my evil ways. I received strict orders to abandon my penchant for alley rats and play with decent children. But we would never agree on who decent children were. Decent children to my grandmother were a whole nother story. Decent children came from decent families. How did you know what a decent family was? A decent family lived in a decent house. How did you know what a decent house was? A decent house was fixed up nice and had a sidewalk in front of it. Decent families didn't let their kids play in the street with no shoes on, or didn't let their kids say ain't. Little did my grandmother know that ain't was my favorite word once I got 2 feet out of her hearing range. So that's the part I want to share about chapter 2. Now I want to share a part towards the end in chapter 21. This might actually be the last chapter of the book. I think it, nope. Yep, it is. It is. Chapter 21. My grandmother came all the way from, and this is after Assata is in prison. And this is right before she is about to break out of prison. All right, now I'm about to read. My grandmother came all the way from North Carolina. She came to tell me about her dream. My grandmother had been dreaming all her life, and the dreams had come true. My grandmother dreams of people passing and babies being born and people being free, but it is never specific. Red birds sitting on fences, rainbows at sunset, conversations with people long gone. My grandmother's dreams have always come when they were needed and have always meant what we needed them to mean. She dreamed my mother would be a school teacher, my aunt would go to law school, and during the hard times, she dreamed the good times were coming. She told us what we needed to be told and made us believe it like nobody else could have. She did her part. The rest was up to us. We had to make it real. Dreams and reality are opposites. Action synthesizes them. I was extremely pleased that she had come. Her air was confident and victorious. The rest of the family prompted her to tell me her dream. You're coming home soon, my grandmother told me, catching my eyes and staring down into them. I don't know when it will be, but you're coming home. You're getting out of there. It won't be too long, though. It will be much less time than you've already been here. Excited, I asked her to tell me all about her dream. We were all talking, I noticed, in a conspiratorial tone. I dreamed we were in our old house in Jamaica. I don't know if you remember that house or not. I assured her that I did. I dreamed that I was dressing you, she said, putting your clothes on. Dressing me? I repeated. Yes, dressing you. Fear ran up and down my back. Was I little or grown? You were grown up in my dream. I felt slightly sick. Maybe my grandmother dreamt about my death. Maybe she dreamt that I was killed while trying to escape. Why else would she be dressing me if I wasn't dead? My grandmother caught my drift of thought. No, you are right. You're alive. It's just as plain as the nose on your face. You're coming home. I know what I'm talking about. Don't ask me to explain it anymore because I can't. I just know you're going to come home and that you're going to be all right. I drilled her for more details. Some she gave and some she didn't. Finally, after I had asked 1,000 questions, my grandmother let all the authority show in her face. I know it'll happen because I dreamt it. You're getting out of this place and I know it. That's all there is to it. My grandmother sat looking at me. There was a kind of smile on her face I can't describe. I knew she was serious. My grandmother's dreams were notorious. Her dreams came true. All of her life, her uncanny senses have been like a radar, picking up and identifying all kinds of things that we don't even see. My family and I just sat there vibing on each other, talking and laughing, bringing up old memories and telling funny stories. Calmness rolled down my back. Calmness rolled down my body like thick honey. My phone about to die. I gotta wrap it up. When I got back to my cell, I thought about it all. No amount of scientific, rational thinking could diminish the high that I felt. A tingly, giddy excitement had caught hold of me. I had gotten drunk on my family's arrogant, carefree optimism. I literally danced in my cell singing, "Feet don't fail me now." I sang the feet part real low, so I guess the guards must have thought I was bugging out, stomping around my cage singing feet, feet. You can't win a race just by running, my mother told me when I was little. You have to talk to yourself. Huh? I had asked. You have to talk to yourself when you are running and tell yourself you can win. It had become a habit of sorts. Anytime I'm faced with something difficult or almost impossible, I chant. Over the years, I have developed different kinds of chants, but I always fall back on the old one. I can, yes, I can. I called my grandparents a day or two before I escaped. I wanted to hear their voices one last time before I went. I was I was feeling kind of mush, and so, as not to sound suspicious, I told them that I wanted to hear some more about the family's history, tracing the ties back to slavery. All too soon, it was time to hang up. Your mother wants to say something else to you, my grandfather told me. I love you, my grandmother said. We don't want you to get used to that place, do you hear? Don't you let yourself get used to it. No, grandmommy, I won't. Every day out in the street now, I remind myself that Black people in America are oppressed. It's necessary that I do that. People get used to anything. The less you think about your oppression, the more your tolerance for it grows. After a while, people just think oppression is the normal state of things. But to become free, you have to be acutely aware of being a slave. I love this book so much, y'all.